Your story is waiting for you today. Your story has something new to say. But your story will only come out to play when you're alone. Alone. Alone in a room with invisible people.
The following episode may contain swearing. Alone in a Room with Invisible People is brought to you by hollyswritingclasses.com. If you find value in what we do and you'd like to support the podcast, go to ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/alone. Or you can go to alonewithinvisiblepeople.com/support us to find out more. Thank you. Hi, this week's episode is going to be a question from one of our writers. The question is basically how to find twists that fit your story. I also wanted to note that at the end of the episode, there is going to be a little additional thing. I unfortunately, this is kind of like a nightmare come true, while doing the Halloween episodes, one slipped through the crack. Not one episode, one story. The contract was signed, it was recorded, and I just failed to make a proper notation of it. So at the very end, there is going to be a story tagged on. It is a story that should have been aired, and my apologies. I really, it's a great story, and I do apologize to the author, who we will list in the show notes. Hi, I'm Rebecca Gallardo, the host of Alone in a Room with Invisible People. I am here today with author and teacher Holly Lyle after the Halloween podcast, and she is making funny faces. Obviously, I just wanted to say real quick, thank you guys so much for the amazing response for the Halloween podcast. It was just incredible. I know everybody was really pleased with Mark. Mark did an amazing job.
Well, Mark's amazing.
Yeah. Did you happen to listen to part 2 yet or not yet?
I have not gotten to listen to part 2 yet.
You were busy.
Yeah. I've been kind of swamped, but...
Yeah. Well, today we are going to be answering some more questions. I'm not sure how many episodes we're going to get out of these, so I'll have to chop them up later. So what you'll be listening to is going to be very specific, and we'll put in the titles. You'll hear a title, but it will have been put in afterwards because we're just going to be sitting here answering questions for a couple hours. But before we do that, I just wanted to let you guys know what we've been doing. It isn't very much, but not very much as far as the writing end. Obviously, I did probably about 3.5 to 4. I think it was something like 3 weeks worth of full-time work on the podcast.
Yeah.
Put everything together if you're counting from when we launched the official submissions.
Yeah.
So I've done a little tiny bit of revision, but I'm looking forward to my Monday, which is going to be editing another podcast and then revisions. Holly, how about you?
Well, overall, the last week I got actually 2 days of revision in on Dead Man's Party.
Yay!
So that was my first fiction since the move. And it went very well. And I did, my stuff for the podcast. And then today my main computer died. So I'm looking at there's no place locally to get another Mac. And
Ooh.
Yeah. And I'm a little stressed out about that. But aside from that, everything's good.
Yeah.
Because at least I still have my backup computer, and at least we were still using the laptop for doing the podcast. So
yeah, and this is a huge reminder to all writers and everything. Have backups. Have a Dropbox account or something like that. Save your stuff to external hard drives. Because
I am not free. Yeah, you have no idea how freaked out I would be if I did not have two separate backup hard drives plus all my stuff on Dropbox.
Yeah. She's been through enough issues with Windows and PCs in the past where she's lost things that she can't get back. Mm-hmm. That she is now very careful with her backups.
Oh, yeah.
And for anybody who has been listening this whole time while I was still editing and working on Leaving Wanda Lucia, I finally got an answer. I did get rejected from Harlequin, and it was a very, very good rejection.
It's a personal rejection.
Yeah.
Personal, from the editor letter.
Yeah, and it said basically, we have very similar stories in the pipeline, which I kind of was like, yeah, but I sent this in 14 plus months ago, so maybe you didn't.
Yeah, but you can't
Yeah,
argue. So.
no, I didn't say anything like that. And I think the thing is, it's the Stalker X. I went very, very cliche a little bit with the general plot. But the other thing that was very important that she said was it's very heroine centric. It's mainly her story. And yeah, there is the point of view of the males and the male and a few other people in there, but they focus on that particular line. They give both characters their big storylines and then have them come together. Mine was very heroine focused, and she said, and that's fine, but it doesn't fit this particular line. And she said, please feel free to send me future stuff, though I can see why you would be hesitant to do so. She was, yes,
14 months later.
yes, she was horrified at my wait time. She doesn't know how it got lost, but she was amazing. Patience Bloom, she does the romance suspense line at Harlequin. And just a shout out to her because I reached out to her on Twitter, immediately got a response, didn't even know until 7 hours later because I figured, she's probably very busy. And she told me she would come back by a certain date. I heard from her by the Monday that she said should hear from me. And she was incredibly professional and incredibly nice. And it was very inspiring to hear that. The story had showed promise, but it didn't fit because of these very specific things. And I was like, hell yeah, that is a very good rejection.
Yes, it was. Yes, and I thought that was exciting as hell.
So that's pretty much everything. Let's go ahead and get into the questions.
Cool.
So we had one on these are all from the forum. These are all picked out by Holly.
And these are all older ones this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting back to the older questions because the last couple have been very recent ones. Mm-hmm. So we don't want to ignore anybody. So the question. My biggest problem is thinking of the thing that changes in the scene in advance of writing it. I can think of lots of changes, but it's thinking of something that changes. And I'm assuming here she's speaking of the twist.
The twist, yeah.
Yeah. I can think of lots of changes, but it's thinking of something that changes that fits in with what's been written that is hard. I do need to think of the change in advance, or else my writing meanders and lacks focus and conflicts. What's the best way to come up with a scene change that fits the story that isn't me dropping aliens or anvils on characters' heads?
Yeah. And that is a really, really common question. It's, how, while I'm writing along, how do I find the twist? Now, there are a number of ways to do this, and one of them is taking little planning breaks and planning ahead maybe 2 or 3 scenes.
Yeah.
And for that, we've talked before about putting together pacts. Protagonist, antagonist, conflict, twist, setting, writing what I call the sentence, which is protagonist versus antagonist in a setting with a twist. And that has all 5 elements of pacts in it.
And try to keep that, or like after you write it, try to narrow it down to 30 words.
Right. And then just do one of those per scene. And that is one way to do it. It is by no means the only way to do it. But if you plan 3 or 4, sometimes 5 scenes in advance, I think with the How to Write a Novel class, I had people planning out about 5 scenes in advance because it kept the people who were pantsers from going wildly astray, but it kept the people who were heavy plotters from getting so freaking buried in their world building and their plotting that they didn't get the book done.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, is that I've done it all 3 ways. I've pantsed, I've done the super plot, especially with the first book I ever wrote, which is Take a Chance on Me. That was the romance that people clearly did not want to see in the revision. They wanted the what was it, Glass House.
Yes.
But it's the plotting, I find, like if you're plotting the entire book ahead of time, and this is something new for me, was your just a couple of scenes ahead thing. It's so refreshing. It's like I've always plotted full on ahead of time, and you end up not using a lot of it because of certain big changes that come into effect when you're just writing, when you're trying to work. And it's like, okay, am I stuck to this old thing that my muse, my right brain is feeling is stale, or do I move to the really, new juicy thing I came up with? Or do I go on with this new thing, and when I was plotting just a few things ahead, I mean, I had a vague idea of an ending in mind, or no, that's right. I started The House on Andrews Ave with an ending kind of already there. So it was neat to work towards an ending, but to work 4 or 5 scenes ahead of time and just kind of, sometimes the twists just naturally come up. And that's something that you get with time. That's something that time and experience, it'll become easier. But how, Holly, do you do it when you don't have a whole lot of time and experience on your end?
Right. You need to have a concept of what your story is. And this goes back to the questioner's anvils and what was it? Anvils
Aliens.
And elephants? Damn. Anvils and aliens. Yes, which is a really cute way of saying, how do I keep from throwing my book completely off the rails?
Yes.
Which all of us have at one time or another done. And I've done it several times and have a couple of serious major hard drive zombies on my hard drive because of this very thing.
And Brian wants the slutty redhead FBI agent story. He wants you to write a story about that. I'm like, she probably would, but she's just got no time.
Yeah, she's a hoe, man. She's a total hoe.
But yeah, that's a good question, because a lot of people don't, I guess they don't start off with this very clear concept of their story. And I mean, hell, most people don't. And it's...
Right, you have an idea. You have this perky little idea, and the back of your brain says, I know the whole story. And it's lying through its teeth.
Yeah.
Because it's like the person who sends you an email and says, look, I have this idea, and if you'll write it, I'll pay you half of whatever we make so that you can write the book, because I've got the idea. Okay, well, as you're finding out while you're writing, the idea is not the book.
Yeah.
And the idea is just a tiny fragment, a bit of inspiration that pulls you towards this story that you then have to fill out in bigger detail. And the things that you most need to know are what the main story is that you're telling. Because if you have a grasp on this, you will not drop anvils and aliens in places where they don't belong.
Yeah, you kind of have to set yourself up with some rules as far as what can go into. That's why when I created Fulton Hills, the entire world, I decided definitely no extraterrestrials, magical creatures, but there, like, I don't want it to be the crime dramas. What do they call those? Procedurals. I don't want it to have a heavy emphasis on procedural, aspects, even though there are, police and medical professionals in there.
Well, let's talk about a procedural for a second, because I just happen to have one of these in the back of my mind. A procedural starts with crime. Mm-hmm. It generally starts with a dead body. It generally starts right at the very beginning with your question, this big question. What is going on? Why is this person dead?
Who is this person? Who killed them? Yeah, how did they kill them?
And anything that does not tie into who is this person? Why are they dead? How did they get dead? And who is going to find out is off target for that story.
Yeah, but then, of course, you still got the aliens and anvils. Okay, well, I'm at a loss for what's next. well, what if I bring in aliens?
Right. What if an alien did it? Okay. What if the person was killed by an anvil falling out of the sky? Well, that kills your procedural, is what that is.
Yes.
And it might seem like the thing to do at the time, but if you understand what your story needs to be, if you're writing science fiction, and you are writing hard science fiction that relies on science, you do not, when you get stuck in a corner, throw in magic. If you are writing a really hot, sexy novel about a guy and a girl, you do not throw in, and you have, that is the whole thing. It's the romance right there. It's romance, it's boy, it's girl, it's hot. You do not throw in a murder.
Yeah.
You have to understand, to avoid anvils and aliens, you have to understand what it is about the story that matters to you. And if you're not writing in a specific genre, if you are just writing the story you want to write, then you have to understand what about that story it is that you want to write, because it's not going to be everything your muse throws at you while you're going along.
Yeah, you got to understand the limitations and the rules that your world has, and your even if you don't have a specific genre in mind, limitations are a blessing.
Yes, limitations will save your ass.
Yeah.
And they will make your story a million times better. If anything can happen, nothing matters. But if only very specific kind of things can happen, and those things are happening all the way along, then everything matters. And it is pulling people into, oh my God, that's a clue, that's something important, that's a hint. What does it mean? What does it mean? That keeps them turning pages, because you understand your world. And I guess one of the really big things that we've hit on a couple of times here now that we should mention is that world is what keeps you from dropping anvils and aliens.
Yes.
If you don't know your world and know exactly what is in your world, you're going to have problems, and they're going to be big.
Yeah. So if you can't really define the genre, like when I was writing Leaving Wanda Lucia, it was a very specific genre, and I had that genre, so I knew what to put in it. But then when I went to the Fulton Hills, I don't have the genre. So I had to create those world rules, so I knew, I can't drop in aliens because there won't be aliens,
Yes.
Anvils, yeah, maybe, but it's just not stuff out of the blue, which I think is the
Right.
point.
Right. Well, I just realized something sitting here. I have a freebie download in the shop on the World Building Clinic. It is a 5-minute world downloadable PDF.
We'll just put it in the show notes. So go to the
Yeah.
show notes at alonewithinvisiblepeople.com. Look for this
Yeah.
episode.
And Becky will put the link in.
Yeah.
And it will show you in 5 minutes, you will build a world, a surprisingly deep, compelling world in just 5 minutes. It's an absolute freebie workshop that is just like my opening throwaway in the actual class. So
It's going to bring you to a sales page and just look for your freebie.
yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that is a complete no obligation whatsoever thing.
Yeah, just like
So-
our worksheets that we add to the website.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
that's a neat way to kind of limit yourself, and in a good way, create the limitations for the worlds that you need as far
Right. Well,
as
that workshop, that tiny little workshop, shows specifically how to create a one limitation world. There is only one thing you can put in the world, and then you build from that.
Nice.
So that is
Yeah.
the most limited of limitations, which is what made me think of it.
Now, this woman says that she has to plot ahead of time. She does need to think of the change in advance. I like the fact that she's been writing long enough to at least know that she's not a pantser. She's somebody that, or at least she's not a huge pantser. She's somebody that does have to have these answers in advance. But I wanted to ask you, like, when you're like that, when you know yourself so well, sometimes, like I did, you fall into this trap of thinking, okay, this is the way that I do things. Because before I took the How to Write Your Novel class, and remember, I've been writing for 20-something years now. I'm old. I can't say that. But I have been writing since I was 11 years old. And I formed this idea in my head of how to write, of how I need to come up with the twists, of how I need to do this. And before I took the How to Write a Novel course, I was stuck in that. So when I took the How to Write a Novel course, it opened my mind that it's just another tool. I can go back to that if I need it. So how she could very possibly be stuck in this idea of this is how I do things. So how could she work with that?
When you are looking at a process that isn't working for you, and what you have to find where you are doing it this specific way and then it's repeatedly breaking is a process that has ceased to work for you for at least this one instance. This isn't to say that it isn't going to work in other places.
Or you can't modify it.
Right, but there are times when it is time to walk away from a process that you're doing and try something different. So one of the things that I would suggest is you have to plan. You're saying, okay, well, I've got to plan, several scenes in advance? Don't. For a while, try just writing and just chasing the twist. Chase, let your muse put down whatever weird-ass thing it wants, let it drop its anvil. I wrote Dead Man's Party that way.
Yeah.
And I had absolutely no idea what was going to happen until my muse let it happen. And that's how I ended up with a dead guy taping his throat shut in the first chapter of the book. That's not the way it's going to be in the revision. That changed drastically. It's still in there, but it's not the first chapter of the book. But that's what my muse threw at me that was nowhere near what I had started to plan out.
Yeah, it can be scary to let go. It can be scary to let go of that process. It was scary as hell for me walking into how to write a novel and deciding, okay, I'm going to do this world that I love that I've been working on since I was 19. I'm going to do it the How to Write a Novel way, and I'm not going to go back to my old stuff. It's scary. Right. It can be, it can stifle you for a minute to sit there and think that you don't have these old throwbacks that like the old standards that have always worked for you in the past. But the point is that if it's no longer working, it's not serving you or your writing. So it's kind of a good thing to let your muse breathe, because your muse, your right brain, is the one that needs to be stimulated. You know, the inner critic is the one that is clinging. That left brain is the one that is clinging to procedure, clinging to the things that you've done a million times.
And this is a case of, if you have an idea of what your world can have in it, then you can trust your muse to go ahead and run without a plan for a little while. Because if you understand the world, and that was what we did in the How to Write a Novel class, was we built this little thing that gave you a piece of your world, and then you worked off of that. And it set very strict limitations to what the world could do. If you have world limitations and you understand what those are, and you have some sort of a concept of the kind of story that you want to write, which is what we talked about even earlier, is, you know, if it's a romance, it has to be a romance. And, you know, you don't throw murder mysteries and stuff into the middle of it. You don't kill off the hero. Then you go ahead and you trust your muse. You chase the rabbit for a little while and see where the rabbit leads, where, you know, what strange little hole it'll drop you down in. And if you end up there with a dead guy taping his throat shut, or an alien walks onto the stage and it fits the world that you set the limitations to, then you let your muse do that. You say, okay, just take me where this is going and let me see for now what else is in there.
Yeah.
But again, you do have to have world limitations set and in place before you can trust your muse to do that. Otherwise, it all just goes to shit.
Yeah, and just remember, too, the biggest thing that I learned through How to Revise Your Novel is that, and everything is fixable. Every mistake that you make is fixable. It's just, the more mistakes you make, the more work it is. But if you're a writer, you're gonna excel when you finally find those fixes. It's gonna be one of those breakthrough, oh my God, amazing moments that we have when we're writing.
Oh, God, yes.
It's the same thing when you're revising. You just have to know how to revise right. And 90% of the people who revise just don't know how to do it where it's fun and it's invigorating and it's incredible. But yeah, the last, do you have any last kind of hints or notes or anything for this particular one?
Yeah. Just one more thing that you can do. One thing that I would recommend probably for anybody who is in this position where you are afraid to let go because you have had so many things go off the rails is before you go any further, just sit down and in one sentence write down what this story means to me. Just, I want to write true love and I want to make myself cry when I do it. Or I want to scare the ever-loving crap out of myself and make my readers shriek when they discover what really happens at the end of this thing. Or I just want to write people that I care about and let them come to some kind of a happy ending after all the shit I'm going to drag them through.
Yeah. Or let your muse kind of play on the paper too. I think that's important too, is just let your muse get all of these ideas out. And again, what Holly says, and this is really important, is never say, oh, that idea is stupid. That's one of those things that's going to lead you to dropping aliens or anvils on characters' heads, is you have poo-pooed, I love that word, you have poo-pooed your muse's ideas so often that it can't function because immediately, it's stopping itself before it thinks of good things because it's...
Because you keep slapping it in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah.
And, well, because you're right brain editor. Let's put the blame where the blame belongs.
Left brain editor.
Sorry. Yes. See, seriously, left and right. I never ever going to get those right.
Yeah, the left brain editor is a dick.
Brain editor is a dick, and that will slap your muse around because your muse is this playful child, and throws awesome stuff out and leaves a mess on the floor, and is chaotic but it's brilliant, and you have to let it play.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of shutting down your left brain left brain editor, and making it stop calling ideas stupid, is what frees up the muse to do the things that it does best.
And we have episodes on the left brain. I'll see if I can find some links and put them in the show notes. But it's basically, you just got to say, you'll get your turn in revision, and just, you can even correct yourself. If you sit there and you say, well, that's stupid, then just immediately catch yourself and say, no, it's not stupid.
And say it out loud.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because your right brain, it doesn't communicate through the same channels as the left brain, and the right brain could stand to hear it.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, and you know what? If you're sitting there thinking you're feeling ridiculous, I sit there and I speak out dialogue to myself while I'm in the bathroom, while I'm taking a shower, while I'm walking around the house. Tony, if Tony was to watch the security, because we've got security cameras, if he was to sit there and watch some of the replays of the security cameras, he would institutionalize me because I sound like other people talking out dialogue, talking out these plot ideas. I'm constantly talking to myself or to the animals, and it's just a way to work things out. So telling yourself, no, that's not a bad idea is not as crazy as that.
No, it's not. And it's not as crazy as my worst case, which is when I went out in the backyard in Todd's Circle while you guys were at school one day and fought out a fight scene for, Diplomacy of Wolves or something. I forget what it was I was writing at the time, while doing the dialogue, running dialogue through my head at the same time for both parts.
Yes, I didn't do the dialogue because there wasn't any, but I have physically done some really weird movements just to kind of see, including like laying on the ground, like moving around like a weird kind of just to see what a human body could move, the extensions and the different forms and stuff. And I'm pretty sure if Tony had seen that, we didn't have security cameras on there, but if Tony had seen that, he would have called 911 and been like, my wife is having some really weird kind of fit seizure thing.
Yeah. Oh, or the time I stuck pencils in my mouth.
Yeah,
So that I
they
could
were
actually
fangs.
figure out. Yeah. I made them into fangs so that I could understand what somebody who had fangs, actual real fangs, sounded like, because she kept turning out, it was Yowley in the Rose Sea, and she kept sounding like Dracula. And when I actually stuck the pencils in my mouth and then read her dialogue, it sounded completely different, and I got it right.
Yeah, so writers do a lot of crazy things in order to get accuracy, in order to get, inspiration. And again, this is the Muse playing too. The part of this is the Muse playing. So, don't limit yourself, and definitely don't worry about telling yourself out loud that your ideas are not stupid.
Right. Take a chance, do a little bit of stupid shit, just maybe close the door before you do it, don't let the neighbors hear. But aside from that, go for it.
Is there any takeaway for that particular question?
I think that was it. Yeah, do some little planning breaks, have some and then trust yourself and tell yourself that one sentence about why you really want to write the story, and then just trust yourself to take some chances.
Okay, well, that was this week's episode. That was this question that we had sitting around. And just to let you guys know, if you have questions, anything like that, just go to the forums. And if you don't have a hollyswritingclasses.com account, it's free. You get the free How to Write Flash Fiction That Doesn't Suck course, plus a whole lot of freebies with the Summer of Fiction writing. And go into the forums. It's very clearly labeled podcast, and ask the questions. We have a topic just for that. We have a lot of questions in there, but we are getting to them. If you'd like to, you can follow us on the socials. That is at AIARWIP on Twitter, Alone with Invisible People on Instagram, Alone in a Room with Invisible People on Facebook, and you can always take a look at our website, alonewithinvisiblepeople.com. If you'd like to support us, go to alonewithinvisiblepeople.com/support us for more information on that. You can also support us on Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/alone. And now, as promised, for the unfortunately my fault late Halloween story, Just Desserts.
Just Desserts by Vicky Shepherd. Slow down, lad. Georgie stopped, pulled his coat tighter to keep out the October wind blustering unimpeded across the marsh, and thrust his torch into the soggy ground. The flame sputtered but held. He closed his hand around the soul cake his mother had put in his pocket before finally releasing him into the night. I don't like you going out, she'd scolded. Ah, Ma'am, the excise asked for me special. I'm the only one knows the path through the bog. Don't you forget what tonight is. You take this. The fresh spice cake, a cross neatly incised on its flattened surface, had gone in his pocket, along with the balaclava his father had sent from the Crimea, with strict instructions that the cake was not for eating, and the balaclava was to hide his face from the roaming spirits on this All Hallows Eve. Georgie smirked. He'd nibbled nearly half the cake by the time the captain and the portly Mr. Price caught up with him. Is it far, boy? Asked the captain. We'm about halfway, sir. I still don't see what's wrong with a dry carriage, grumbled Price, shaking water from his boots. You think Black Jenkins will just let you attend to his eyes? Your evidence will hang him, man. He's agents all over the county who'll gladly see you dead in a ditch. They wouldn't think of the marsh, though. Nor would I, muttered Price. Georgie took his chance. Grabbing the torch and flinging it as far as he could, he sped off into the dark. Ignoring the shouts of outrage, he sprang sure-footed into the darkness. A crescent moon gave him all the light he needed. Silence engulfed him, and he stopped to take his bearings. The wind had dropped. Mist was beginning to rise. His ears were chilled, but he couldn't find the balaclava. Finally, he saw a pinprick of light. Jenkins had promised someone would meet him on the east side to guide him out. The smuggler also promised him a small fortune if he lost his charges to the bog, and that his house would be razed with his mom inside it if he didn't. He'd gone 50 paces before he suddenly found himself up to his waist in ooze. Confused, he flailed around but only sank further. The light was coming closer. He cried out in relief. "I see your face, Georgie Hughes." A small, whizzing, gnome-like creature with a horn lantern danced out of the mist and crouched down before him. "Treacherous boy. The Pooka knows. Brazen boy to come out unmasked tonight. Wicked boy who gets his just deserts." Georgie, still slowly sinking, shook his head in disbelief, remembering tales his mother had told him of the Pooka, the fairy folk with little lights that lure you to your doom, who couldn't harm you if you bore a cross and hid your face. He saw the balaclava in the Pooka's hand as the icy, fetid water flooded his screaming throat.